Hey, everybody, and welcome to another segment of the Building Boardroom Brilliance series. I am so excited to teach. I'm always excited to teach. I'm always excited to give relevant content and information and wisdom to those of us who are navigating through leadership, through entrepreneurship, through business owners, and all of these amazing roles that we play where sometimes we need a little bit of information and a little bit of structure, some strategy, some steps and systems so that we are able to operate at our optimum level. So I'm so excited to be able to help leaders to execute in excellence. I'm so excited to be able to help leaders expand their enterprise. I'm so excited to be able to help leaders really enlarge what it is that they're doing. And so the Building Boardroom Brilliance series is for leaders. This segment is specifically for those of you all who are leaders in your arena of expertise, who are owners, business owners, who are working with teams and who work with other people. This is to give some enlightenment, some clarity, some direction to you in that arena. So I am Dr. Elisa Harney. I am a coach. I'm a business strategist, and I really was looking to see where the gaps were sometimes in the lack of support when it comes to launching and in leadership. And one of the things that I noticed was that we don't really have a lot of content. We don't really have a lot of information. We don't really have a lot of resources sometimes in our circles available for those of us who are trying to lead in excellence, who are trying to execute in excellence. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was to provide information, inspiration, and be very impactful to help us as leaders increase our presence, increase our platform, increase our profit, increase power partnerships. And so grateful for you all that join me on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. This is a relatively new segment, leadership segment. So thank you all for joining. If you're watching the replay, hello and welcome. You're always welcome to share, to tag leaders that would benefit from this information. Every week, I try to provide resources and really teach in a very structured, strategic way for those of us in leadership to give us the tools that we need, the resources that we need to be effective as we stand before people, as we move forward in what it is that we do. And so if you have not watched any of the, or were not a part of any of the previous Building Boardroom Brilliance series, you are welcome to subscribe to my YouTube channel. There is a segment specifically for Building Boardroom Brilliance. And so leaders, make sure that you guys go. We had some amazing topics so far. We dealt with, are you creating leaders or leaners? We really dug into some things about creating, how not to create a culture of chaos. We talked about the strategy of intentionality, 5 ways to increase your your social media presence. So there are a lot of resources and tools on that YouTube channel. So you're definitely welcome to go and subscribe and set your timers to join me on Wednesdays for this leadership segment. So today I want to deal with something that affects us in a whole lot of ways. It really affects us across the board, but specifically today I want to deal with this in the realm of leadership, in the realm of positioning ourselves to lead people, and that is communication, because communication is so vital. Communication is humongous. Communication is so potent in our being able to expand our vision, being able to be effective in leadership, in unveiling whatever it is that our signature offer is to the people, to the world. Being able to articulate it correctly is so important, but there's a danger with that. And so today's segment is called "You Said What?" The dangers of misdiagnosed dialogue. Sometimes we don't say what we really mean, and we really don't mean what we are saying. Sometimes there's a disconnect. I call it the travesty of translation, which means that there are a lot of times when we assume that because people know us, they know our intent, they know our objective. They know what we were trying to say. We shouldn't have to fix it. We shouldn't have to go back and make it plain. They should have just gotten what we said, and they should have known better. Why? How dare you think I was trying to say that? That's not what I was trying to say. Or we say things and other people listen and think, you said what? And you're thinking, oh, it's fine. They know me. They know what I meant. That's a travesty. That's a misnomer. That's an erroneous assumption that you're making, that people are able to dig deep inside of you and know exactly what it is that you're trying to articulate, and interpret it correctly. And so there's a danger there of misdiagnosed dialogue. There is a danger when we put the responsibility of our intentions into somebody else's hand. So let me just go ahead and say this again. There is a danger when we put the intentions of our articulation in the hands of someone else. That means that we're just saying whatever we want to say, and we're giving other people permission to come up with whatever they want to come up with. And so then we can't turn around and get mad and get angry, and get confused and be shocked when it comes back to us and it's not what we said. You remember in elementary school, perhaps, they used to play the telephone game, and the teacher would whisper to the first student, and the first student would whisper to the second student, and it went on. And then by the time they got to the end, the last student would have to stand up and say what the teacher said. And 9 times out of 10, 100 times out of 100, it was incorrect, because somewhere along the way, something got lost in translation. Somewhere along the way, because of different factors of articulation, the message, the intention of it was lost. And so when it was told back to the teacher, she, usually it was funny. And she was just like, that's not what I said. And it was a fun game. But I think what happens is, in real life, this happens to us. If you are leading a team, if you are trying to put a staff together or a group of people to work with, if you are under somebody else's leadership, if you are over an organization or a business or a ministry, sometimes what comes out of your mouth is not what people take home with them. Sometimes what you give them is not what they leave with, because there is a travesty of translation. Everybody does not understand correctly. Everybody does not interpret it. And so I really want to deal with the dangers of misdiagnosed dialogue, so that we can lean in to what may have missed the mark, or where we may have missed the mark. One of the things about leadership is that we have to take responsibility when it comes to things that people don't get correctly, or things that go wrong. It's easy to kind of look around, and yes, we're supposed to do internal assessments, and we're supposed to make note of what might have happened and what might be misconstrued, but we also have to do that internal inventory and internal investigation. Make sure that we are properly positioned to prosper in whatever it is that we're trying to do. I've always said this, that the most important thing about a message is not that it is delivered, but it is that it's received. I'll say that again, because this is so potent. It's important when it comes to those of us who have positioned ourselves as leaders and as people in authority. It is important that we understand that the most important thing about a message is not that it is delivered, but that it is received. I often refer to iPhones and how you can send a message to somebody, and you can see a little D at the bottom of the message that says, hey, that message was delivered. But if you're like anything like me, I can notice that a message was delivered to me, but I'm in the middle of something right now. So it'll register that I got a message, but that message was not received because I didn't open it. I didn't read into it. I didn't look at it. And so until that D turns to an R, then that there was a miss. I haven't gotten that message yet. Amazon, I can order from Amazon all day, and they can say, well, we delivered the package. Yes, but did I receive it? Did I sign for it? Did I give you information, or did I give you confirmation that it was in my hands? You delivered it. You dropped it off somewhere. But until I can give you a receipt that I was receiving it, then there's going to be a problem. And so I think for a lot of us, we have concentrated so long on making sure that our messages were delivered that we did not really lean in to the necessity of making sure that that message was received, to make sure that the people who are listening are able to clearly understand what it is that we're saying. If we're not opening the platform for people to be able to ask us questions and to give us their interpretation of what it is that we're saying. Again, we're so focused on delivering messages that we're not really concerned about whether that message is received. And that affects us as leaders in so many different ways. If you are an entrepreneur, and if you're an industry leader in a certain arena, and then you're wondering why aren't people responding to my products, to my services, to my programs, then it could be that there's a danger somewhere in misdiagnosed dialogue. If you are a minister, if you oversee any type of organization, a ministry, a nonprofit, and people are not partnering with your vision, or they're not executing in excellence the way that you would have them do it, then there may be a danger of some misdiagnosed dialogue. And so, again, this is specifically to help us understand that there is danger in misdiagnosed dialogue. And so we have to make sure that we put more relevance in the message being received than just delivering the message. That's why when I teach, oftentimes you'll hear me say, let me take a moment and ask the audience and poll the people, is this making sense? Is this clear? Is this helpful? Because I'm not just concerned about delivering this message. I'm more concerned about whether or not this message is going to be received. So today we're dealing with, again, you said what? And I really want to deal with helping us. And so let's begin with 8 barriers to communication. I want to make sure that you guys are able to get this information as leaders. I want you to have something that you can walk away with. When I've said this before, when your message, when somebody misquotes you, or something has happened where you see that there is confusion in what they interpreted, a lot of the times we have to understand that we're the source of that message, and so sometimes it's because our communication is not clear, and so a lot of the times when we are agitated or when we're frustrated, we try to talk louder and talk stronger in hopes that that's going to get the message. If we're emphatic about it, if we're talking in a very passionate tone, we feel like if I yell, if I show people how the emotionalism behind it, they're gonna get my message. But that's not true. Sometimes our language is unclear. Sometimes our emotional reactivity is causing people to pull back because they're like, I can't hear you through that noise. Or sometimes, and we don't like to admit this a lot of the times, but sometimes we're just not making any sense. It sounds good in our head. It sounds as though, well, I understood that correctly, that it made plenty of sense to me. Well, the point of the message is not that it's delivered, it is that it's received. And so just because it makes sense to me doesn't mean that the people that I am trying to communicate it to are really being able to get this. And so let's begin with 8 barriers to communication. And I really, my intention is that this is going to help give you some clarity and some confidence as you communicate your vision to the people that you feel called to. So the first barrier is a physical barrier. Sometimes the barrier to communication is because physically there's something in the way. We're trying to talk to people and we're trying to give them information while we're on the phone, while we're watching TV, while we're doing other things. And so there's physically something that's in the way, that is causing the information not to be articulated or not to be received clearly. And so we have to look to see if sometimes there's other people, you're trying to say something and a bunch of people are saying a bunch of different things at the same time. And so the message is not really being received because there are some physical barriers that are in the way. Most people have dining room tables, right? And usually dining room tables have these elaborate decor in the middle of it, big flowers or big something. But one of the first things I do, I actually stopped using the huge flowers because I was like, that's a physical barrier. If I'm trying to deliver some information, if I want people to talk to me, I want to be able to look at you. I want to be able to see past hearing your tone. I want to look at your language. I want to engage with you. I want to let you know that I am paying attention to what you're saying. So I move those physical barriers out of the way when we sit down to eat because I want us to have uninterrupted dialogue that does not have any things that cause me not to be able to see because it gets in the way, because it creates a distraction. And so sometimes part of the reason why our communication isn't clear is because there's a physical barrier that's in the way. The second reason why sometimes, or the second barrier to our communication is misperceptions. That's making assumptions without investigation. Now, sometimes we have to give an ouch to that because it is very easy for us to make an assumption about something based on what we believe. And we try to use Blue's Clues and context clues to make assumptions about things that we really don't have all of the information. for. And so that barrier to our communication becomes a misperception, because we've come up with this own internal dialogue about something based on our assumption, not based on reality, not based on facts. We didn't go in and we didn't do the proper investigations that we needed to do to make sure before I have this conversation, before I call myself confront you, before I call this meeting, before I accuse, before I name, I need to make sure that this is not a misperception, that I didn't see it and interpret it one way and it really wasn't. So what am I doing to make sure that that message has related to me properly? What have I done to make sure that the people that I am connected to understood clearly what I'm doing? I just need to make sure that I'm not misinterpreting. I say all of the time that dysfunctions distort discernment. And so a lot of the times when we are dysfunctional on the inside, when there are things that make us interpret people the wrong way. Oh, they're suspicious. Oh, it looks like they don't like what I'm saying, or I can just tell they're not with what I want. That could be a misperception, that we are just simply taking that upon ourselves and making this assumption about it, and it's nothing, and it's not a big deal. But we have done this and that, and so misperceptions is a communication barrier that really gets in the way of us being able to articulate our vision and hear people's response. The third barrier is psychological interference. And this is a really huge one, psychological interference. When you are mad, when you are stressed, when you are sad, when you are angry, you don't hear correctly. You can't hear well and you can't speak well. One of the things that I've learned to do communicatively is that when I am in a certain frame of mind where I know it's creating internal interference, what I will do is I will delay having certain conversations, or I will ask that we can do this and put this off for a later time, because I realize that I can't hear clearly at this moment. I realize that I have some psychological interference that's causing me not to be able to really, I'm not going to be able to hear you clearly. A lot of the times when we get heated, a lot of the times when we are operating in the spirit of offense and we are defensive, when people are trying to speak to us, when they're trying to talk to us, when they're trying to give us information, that psychological interference will cause us to shut down emotionally. Our ears shut down. We don't want to talk. We start giving the silent treatment. As leaders, that's a barrier to our ability to articulate and communicate. And so we have to make sure that sometimes, and we're human. So notice that I did not say stop doing that. What I said was, when we get into the place where we're aware, this is what we do. We create awareness to what's happening in our atmosphere, so that we can find ways to not move in this. This is what building boardroom brilliance is all about, is making sure that we're able to execute in excellence. And so one of the things that in communication that happens with us is that we have to learn how to take a time out. I don't care how grown you are. I don't care how resourceful you may be. Sometimes we need a time out. Sometimes when we realize that emotionally we are at capacity, we are overwhelmed, we are past where we have to say, hey, I can't hear right now. I'm quick to say it. Listen, if I'm angry, if I've gotten an attitude, I have to really say, listen, can we talk right now? Because I can't hear a thing you're saying. I know that there are words coming out of your mouth. I recognize that we're trying to have a conversation, but I can tell that something on the inside of me has shut down and I'm not able to hear you correctly. We also need to be able to tell when we're teaching or when we're working with other people, we need to be able to pick up on the clues that say, I'm not listening to you. You just said something that triggered me. And even though what you're saying is correct, I may need a time out to digest this information. I may need a time out to really process this information. And so even as leaders, yes, we are tasked sometimes to say the hard things. Yes, we are tasked sometimes to deliver messages that might not be well received. However, we need to be mindful that, we don't just get to say, well, I said what I said. It's just what it is. No, we still have to be mindful. It is still our responsibility to make sure that when we're speaking to people and we're giving them something that's hard to digest and hard to swallow, that we look and we make sure that we're saying, do you need a moment to digest this? Do you need a moment to process it? Because if they've internally shut down, then no matter what it is that we're saying to them, we've hit a brick wall and they're not able to digest it. So that's why a lot of the times we can get frustrated at people that we're trying to coach or mentor or train or teach, because we're saying they don't listen to anything that I said. And how many times do I have to say this? Listen, it might be that you have to check to see if you are not creating some what we call cognitive dissonance for people. You're saying something that rubs against their theology, what they believe, how they thought they were right. And so what happens is we're trying to tell them something and they're not able to really digest it because there now is some psychological interference. It doesn't mean that they're trying to shut you down. It doesn't mean that they're trying to be a renegade. It does not mean that they're trying to not respond to you. But we have to understand that as humans, there's fallacy in our feelings. They can trick us sometimes, and so we have to make sure that we are operating in emotional intelligence when we are having conversations with people, and we're having to talk about hard things, or we're trying to talk through things that are going to make people feel uncomfortable. Emotional interference, it's something that causes us to hear differently or not hear at all. And so it's a barrier to communication. So we always want to make sure that we are aware of that. The fourth barrier to communication, the fourth thing that will cause us not to be able to be clear in what we're saying, is a lack of experience, no commonality. I said at the beginning that there's something that I call the travesty of translation, and we assume that what we're saying is going to be interpreted correctly by somebody else. But what we have to understand is if you have not been through something that somebody else has been through, then there is going to be danger of misdiagnosed dialogue, because I don't really understand what you're saying. There used to be this slang called "you feel me?" Do you feel me? And people used to be like, "Yeah, I feel you," and I would be like, "No, I don't feel you at all. This doesn't translate to me because I don't have that experience." So what you're alluding to is not relative to me. I don't get it, and so sometimes we're not aware that we're trying to sometimes talk to people who don't have a shared experience, or we're listening to people and we don't have a commonality sometimes. And so it's very important as leaders, when you're trying to articulate a message to somebody, when you're trying to deliver a message in a way that it is received, that you look to see, is there some commonality in what I'm saying? Usually as a speaker, I've been a speaker for years. I've traveled many places on platforms to be able to deliver messages. And one of the things that I always try to do is give practical protocol for purpose, for progression, something that I can do that's practical, that's practical and relatable, that there's a commonality where all of us can feel the same way. All of us can find some common ground, so that when we're able to get the message, we can understand it. I know a lot of people like to be extra verbose and they like to be extra communicative and they talk over people's head, not because that's their natural way of language, but because they're trying to be impressionable. But if the message is not received, it does not matter that it is delivered. So when we're speaking to people, we have to make sure that there's some commonality there. We have to make sure there is a way for us to connect through our communication, or else it's going to be a barrier to what we're trying to say. Now, let me stop for a moment and ask the audience. Let me poll the people. Is this making sense? If it is, if it's translating well, can you guys put a number 1 in the comments? Just let me know that what I'm teaching, what I'm explaining is relevant to you all, that it is helpful, that this is a resource that you guys can really take and do something with, because I want to make sure that as I am teaching, I'm not a victim of some of the things that I'm trying to explain and put out there for you all as well. All right, I see you guys thank you guys so much. I appreciate you all so much, because I want to make sure that we're equipped so that we can execute in excellence, so that we can really expand our expertise and move forward as leaders, as today's leaders in this society. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you guys. So number 5, the fifth barrier to communication is not listening. Not listening. I remember years ago, probably over 15 years ago, when I used to work for one of the biggest nonprofits in the world. I remember that one time there were some seminars. They used to ask us to go and find some personal development courses that we may be interested in going to. And I remember that there was a training on listening. And I thought, why would people train anybody on listening? You're born to listen. You can just listen. But I went there, and thank you so much. But I went to the training and I discovered some very potent things, some things I hadn't thought about before. A lot of the times we're listening to defend, not to decipher. Let me just say that again, because I want to make sure that we're understanding it. A lot of the times when it comes to communication and not listening, we're listening to defend and not to decipher. We're trying to defend ourselves. We're trying to defend our stance. We're trying to defend who we are. We're trying to defend. And I'm sorry if you guys hear my puppy in the background. His name is Cheddar, and sometimes he gets very excited. So if you do hear him, please pardon me for that, because he's very excited and very excitable. But number five, not listening. A lot of the times we listen to defend and not to decipher. So we have this place where we are defensive. When somebody says something to us, we get stuck on that place where we feel defensive. We get stuck on that place where we're offended. And so now I'm not listening to you so that I can really hear your point of view. I'm putting on pause that place that you said there's a placeholder, and I'm waiting for the time for you to stop talking so I can go right back to that point that you made, because now I have a problem. Now I have an attitude. And so I haven't heard anything else that you're saying, because you're going to have to get what it is that I'm saying. So a lot of the times we listen to defend and not to decipher. We're trying to defend ourselves. We're listening for a cue instead of hearing what to do. You're trying to tell me, what I did wrong, or you're trying to tell me where there was a problem, or you're trying to tell me where we need to fix something. But now I'm listening for a cue, and I'm not listening to hear what I need to do in this situation. I'm just listening for something to set me off. I'm listening for something to get an attitude about. And so we want to make sure that our lack of listening is not creating a barrier for us when we are getting ready to move forward. Number six, and a lot of people, and if you are guilty, you can say ouch in the comments. I'm okay with that. The sixth barrier to communication is unsolicited advice. It becomes a barrier for openness. Sometimes, one of the things that we are so great at doing is giving people advice. We love giving our opinions. And while that is all well and good, what happens when it's not solicited? What happens if I didn't ask you? Sometimes we are well-meaning. We mean well. We see things and we think that it is our responsibility to address it. We think that somebody has given us has deputized us so that we're the person. Well, it's my job to let people know when things are wrong. It's my job to go live on everything that I see in the world that's wrong, and I'm going to deal with it. It's my job to make sure that I look around at the people I'm connected to and tell them what I don't like about them, what their hair looks like, what I think they should do next time, what I think about the decision that they already made. Unsolicited advice, what happens is it becomes a barrier to openness. So what will happen moving forward is now people will not want to have conversations with you. People will not want to stay connected with you. People will not want to work with you because you're giving unsolicited advice. Listen, I can tell you as a grown woman in my mid 40s, if I wanted an opinion, I have no problem asking for it. When I want some feedback or some information, I promise you, I will poll the people. I will ask you. I will pull you to the side. I will say, what do you think? But 9 times out of 10, when people move forward in something as grown people, I'm not talking about babies or children, grown people, even if they're your grown children, they already understand what it is that they're doing and why they want to do it. If they're not sure, or if you are in a position where you are their mentor, or whether you are their coach, or whether you have a certain level of authority that they have given you, then you do have permission to say what it is that you said, because they've already given you that access with that instruction. But we have to understand that when we give people unsolicited advice, they weren't looking for it. They didn't ask for it. You're going to throw them off because they didn't see it coming. And so a lot of the times you will make people feel attacked. They will feel like you just unnecessarily attacked me, that I walked in and you guys had this, you were already set up for me. It was a trap. I didn't know that you were leading me into an emotional ambush. Let me say it like that. When you give unsolicited advice to other people, it can come across as emotional ambush. I was not prepared for you to sit me down and tell me what you think about the choices that I've made in relationships. I was not prepared for you to come and tell me what you think I should be doing with my business. I was not prepared for you to tear apart a picture that I posted and then send me a message about everything that you felt like that picture meant to you. I was not prepared. And so your unsolicited advice makes me and it feels like an emotional ambush. And so we have to be careful when we are the people is delivering communication, that if we're not in a place of prominence, if we're not a person's pastor or a person's leader or a person's boss or somebody that has oversight over people where you have that authority, be very mindful about the timing, about what you tend to do when you feel like it's something that you need to say. One of the things that I make a strategic and a very intentional practice of doing is when I want to say something to somebody and it is unsolicited, I will make my intentions known and then ask for permission. Listen, I feel like I'm teaching better than y'all are in this comment section. What we have to do, this is how we move towards emotional intelligence. This is how we build boardroom brilliance, because communication is everything. I say to them, listen, I was looking at something that you did the other day, or I was thinking over a conversation that we had, or we were in a meeting and there was something that you said in that meeting that kind of made me think a certain kind of way. Do you mind if we have a conversation about it? Or may I share with you what was placed in my heart? It doesn't matter what arena you're in. It doesn't matter if it's in the prophetic arena or the professional arena. Even prophetically, as a prophet, if I am not in a building where I am asked to minister to people and there's just a word that came to me for somebody unsolicited, listen, I have a word in my heart that I feel led to share. Are you okay with me releasing this over you? Again, personally, even when it comes to our family and our friends, you don't, just because you are in a place of closeness, make sure that you're not setting up emotional ambushes for people that you really love and want to help and protect, because you could be setting them up to not want to speak to you and not want to deal with you and not want to connect with you because you're giving them something unsolicited and they feel a certain kind of way. And so sometimes we just have to go, and that's why I'm giving practical protocol for our progression. Sometimes we just have to go back to the basics. We have to be kind. We have to use manners. We have to say, is it okay if I say this? Do I have permission to release this to you? Do you mind if we have a conversation of this? Because it's just like going in a woman's purse without permission. First of all, I didn't ask you to go. Did you just grab my purse, look through it, and then tell me about, hey, why do you have any gum in here? I was looking for some lotion in your I'm sorry. That I feel ambushed. I feel attacked. That's my personal stuff. Ask for permission. And then when you go in there, now come back and say to me, look, you probably want to keep these things in it so you can be more prepared. I hope that helped. If it helped, let me see in the comments that this is helpful, or this helped you. Because again, a lot of the times, sometimes we're victims of this, and a lot of the times, sometimes we are the people who are victimizing other people unintentionally, because nobody comes and breaks this down and let us see this from a different perspective. Now, I took a little time with that one because I felt like that was one of the big issues. Thank you all for joining. Thank you guys that are sharing this moment with me as we build boardroom brilliance and move forward in effective leadership. Number 7, the number 7 thing that is a barrier to communication is nonverbal cues. Nonverbal cues. And I know this because I used to be really, really guilty about this myself. So what happens, and this is the way that I say it, forget what you said. I know how you made me feel. So let me just say this again. Forget what you said. I know how you made me feel. Let me say this again. Forget what you said. I know how you made me feel. So here's what happens when it's nonverbal cues. When somebody is approaching us, when somebody wants to have a conversation with us, when somebody is getting ready to present something to us, especially if they're coming to tell us something that we may not want to hear, we know how to set our face. We know how to set our language to let people know, you can talk all day, but I'm not hearing a thing that you're saying. Nonverbal cues is a barrier to communication. We're trying to shut something down without shutting it down. That's being an emotional bully. More on that later. But we have to make sure that we are not posturing ourselves like we're not the people that get to tell everybody, this is what happened, this is how I feel, this is what you should do. And then when they respond, all of a sudden, we let them say, oh, I'm done with it. I said what I had to say. And we give them a look. We position our body, we posture ourselves in a defensive mode. We let people see how agitated we are, that they've interrupted our day. We let people see how ungrateful we are for whatever it is that they've done. We let people know that I am just not feeling you right now. And so this is where we have to learn that we are mindful of our tone, not just our tone, but mindful of the way our body is positioned, that we receptive. Some people are not as open to communicate as other people. Some people do care about what you look like when they're trying to talk to you. And especially if you're in a place, in a position of leadership, and you're trying to help people navigate into another level of boldness and wholeness, you have to make sure that you look receptive when they're talking to you. It doesn't matter, well, I hold my hands like this because I'm cold. Yeah, but even if you're cold, be mindful of that so that you can open your posture up to let people know, listen, I am all ears. I want to hear what it is that you have to say. I don't want you to get the wrong idea that I'm shutting you off and that I'm being cold or distant, because that is a barrier to communication. And so it's not going to matter if you said whatever it is that you said. You might be saying the right thing to me, but I'm looking at your body language and I'm listening and at those cues that you're not saying. And because I feel a way, you're not going to be the person that I entrust with certain information moving forward, because you made me feel some kind of way. And so all of that matters when it comes to communication. Last but not least, and then I'm going to give you guys 4 ways to give clarity to your communication. Last but not least, a potential barrier to communication is culture and language. Culture and language. Some families, like mine, are very loud and they overlap in communication. Other families communicate through touch. They like to touch. They hug. They kiss. They hold hands. They're always, you just see. And so sometimes what happens is, if we are not clear of the culture that we are coming into, if we are not understanding of how people were brought up, how people were raised, how people were positioned, how people learned to communicate, and then sometimes that is a barrier to communication. Sometimes we can misdiagnose their dialogue because we see it. I always share this story because, number one, I think it's hilarious, but it's a commonality for people. My husband was brought up Methodist. His family are, they don't do a lot of, talking. They don't do a lot of, emotional carrying on physically. They kind of sit and they don't mind sitting in silence. And, somebody may say something and they may talk for a few moments and then it just kind of gets quiet. That was something very unusual for me. I came from a family, everybody talked over each other. We just kind of overlapped one another. We just, we have these internal colloquialisms that we just talk. There's certain things that we just understand in our language. And I'll never forget, one day my granny called, and my granny is just we are like, me and my granny like this. And she is my number one. Like, if I'm Beyonce, she's the Beehive. And so she called me one day, and I had her on speaker, and she was giving me some information. Like, we were having a juicy conversation about something, and I was telling her something, and she was telling me something, and I was like, "Shut up!" And my husband like to fainted, and he was like, "You just told your granny to shut up." And and I was just like, "What?" But he didn't. We talk like that because my granny tells me that all the time. Shut your mouth right now and keep talking. Like, that's just a thing. I was born in the South, so that's just one of those things that we did. And I remember how offended he was. Just like, "Oh my God!" And so it bled over into our marriage because we are used to talking over each other. And so he would talk, and I would be talking too, and he would just shut down. And I'll be like, "What's my?" He was like, "No, if you're gonna talk, I'm not gonna talk." And I'm like, people can just talk at the same time. What do you mean? We just can talk together. I can still hear you. But how he grew up, no, that is rude. You're interrupting me. You don't care about what I'm saying. And I actually had to go unlearn something so that, again, it does not matter about the message being delivered. Is it received? And so it did not matter. What I wanted to do, and what I did do for a while, if I'm truthful, is that I defended that, well, I'm sorry. That's just the way we were raised. That's just how my family, as if that was an excuse for me to talk over him. And the truth of the matter was, it did not matter that I was raised like that. What happens is, I had to understand that culture and language is a potential barrier to communication. And I had to realize that no matter of what my intention was, his reality is that I feel as though I am being disrespected and that you don't hear. And so I literally would have to like bite my lip to just not say anything until he was done talking, because that was not the environment that I was raised in. And so we have to know that we can train our brain. And when we train our brain sends signals to our mouth. And so we have to understand that if we're going to be effective as leaders, if we're going to be effective as we move forward in whatever arena we move forward in, we're going to have to be able to be clear in what we say. And so, I never give a challenge without giving us some solutions so that we are able to move forward and have something that we can do. I want to give you guys 4 ways to have clarity in your communication. I was studying the works of Kathy Caprino, and she's excellent at communicating and teaching and communication. And so some of the things that she mentioned in it, I kind of took some of those as well and merged them with some things that I've always taught that were very similar. And so I want to give you 4 ways to give clarity to your communication, because again, the point of the message is that it's received, not just that it is delivered. So number one of the things that we have to do is we have to neutralize our defensiveness and our emotionality. This is very, very important for us. Neutralize our defensiveness and our emotionality. So what happens when we neutralize something? If you're thinking about a car and you put your car in neutral, that car is saying, I'm not parked. That means I'm not just holding myself against moving and I'm not actually going, but I am in a place where I can move one way or another if needed. I'm giving no resistance, and I'm also not trying to be proactive with something unintentionally. And so, to be clear, let me neutralize my defensiveness. I'm not just going to default to defensiveness. I'm not just going to completely get emotional and over emotional and get completely sensitive so that I can throw somebody off when they're saying something to me that I don't want to hear. And so how do I neutralize my defensiveness and my emotionality? I teach this in my speaking course in professional as a professional development. This 4T methodology that I've put together. Number one, be cognizant of your tone. The tone in which you are saying something is so very important. Be mindful of your timing. It's not actually what you're saying, but when did you say it? Because you might have caught me in a place, I said this earlier, where my emotional interference is louder than what it is that you're trying to relate to me. Be mindful of your tact. Are you being tactful when you say things, or are you just saying, well, they already know me. If it comes up, it comes out. No, ma'am, and no, sir. That is not effective communication. And then be mindful of your technique. There is a way to handle people. There is a way to approach them. And if you are connected with people, you already know if they are literal. You already know if they have a sarcastic sense of humor. And so when you talk with them, your technique can be tailored. Man, that's good. You can tailor your technique towards the audience or towards the people or towards the person that you are talking to. And so in neutralizing your defensiveness, I gave you guys that for free. I teach this in my speaking training. Look at your tone, your timing, your tact, and your technique. Be mindful of those things so that you can neutralize your defensiveness and your emotionality, because it is a barrier. Number 2, remember that what you know is not necessarily what they know. Now, this is a big one, because I said at the beginning that there is a travesty of translation. And so sometimes we assume that people understand exactly where we're coming from and what we're saying and how we're trying to say it. But what you know is not necessarily what they know. Understand that all of us don't have the same access. So some people have a different level of access to information that somebody else may not have. Understand that we don't all have the same awareness. Just because you are very emotionally aware of who you are and where you are, somebody else may not have realized that yet or have not matured into that. Recognize that everybody doesn't have the same level of accountability. And so some people are not there to help mentor or coach or guide people into that awareness. Attitude. And then last, attitude. Everybody does not have, the same type of attitude towards people. I've always been a person that I do not get out of character. That's just one of the things about me. Like, I just stay in character. It's just one of those things. I learned how to neutralize my defensiveness and my emotionality a while ago. And so I don't get out of character. It's you got to be really, really good to get me out of character. And even if you're really good, if I got out of character, you wouldn't know about it. I would not give you that honor. power of knowing that. But a lot of the times we don't realize that we may be in a different place emotionally, and then we can get very condescending and very critical towards people who did not respond the way we feel like we would have responded. But we have to understand that what we know, what we've learned, what we've accomplished, what we've been aware of, does not mean that somebody else has had that same experience. And so their attitude about things are mirrored by the experiences that they have went through, whether they've had enough of this or not enough of something else. And so when we are talking to people, we have to look at the fact that what I know might not necessarily be what they know. And so I need to be cognizant of the fact of, when I'm talking, I'm looking, as I said earlier, for some common ground. I'm looking for a way to make sure that my message is received. Number 3, be empathetic. Be more empathetic. So what happens is, when you are getting ready to approach someone with a message, no matter what it is, no matter what arena it's in, as a leader, as somebody in any level of authority, see it with their eyes. However you're approaching them, and in whatever way, take a moment to see it with their eyes, hear it with their ears, putting yourself in their position. How would they hear what it is that you're about to release? Feel it with their heart. Don't look at, well, my heart is pure, so I'm saying this with pureness. But we're not talking about your heart for a second. We're talking about somebody else's heart. So when you put yourself in another person's place before you deliver a message, before you release your words, when you are more empathetic, it causes that conversation is going to be so much more clear. It's going to have so much more impact. It's going to have a little bit more longevity to the results that are sustained within that conversation, because I'm very I'm conscientious, and I'm very consistent, and I'm very considerate of what I'm about to say, because I've already thought about it with you in mind. When I get ready to teach, when I come on platforms to teach on any level and in any arena, whether it's professional development, personal development, prophetic development, I'm not just thinking about what I want to say. I'm thinking about the people that I want to say it to, and what's the best way to navigate that message. What's the best way to make sure and ensure that that message is received. And so a lot of the times, this is the position we have to put ourselves in. And then last but not least, because I like to do this segment in about 45 minutes or so. The last thing that I believe is going to help us in all of this is know yourself, your story, and your subjectiveness to it. Know yourself, your story, and your subjectiveness to this. Is your truth the truth? Now, I may have to let this sit for a second, because I saved this best one for last, because I want to make sure that it sits on you for just a second. Is your truth the truth? Well, that's my experience, and that's how I think about it. And I said what I said, and that's great. But if you want to have impact, it's not about you delivering the message. It's about whether or not I received it. And so, is your truth the truth? We all know that there are some sides to every story. What happened, and what you think happened, or your interpretation of what happened. And so how subjective am I to my story? What type of position does that put me in when I am telling it? And so, is my truth the truth, or is it my interpretation of what happened? I always say that truth plus transparency equals transformation. Truth is what actually happened. Transparency is the part you're able or willing to release, and transformation is what happens as a result of that. Is your reality the reality? And so, just because fear is not a part of my atmosphere, just because I've learned how to see through a filter of faith instead of a filter of fear, does not mean that reality is somebody else's reality, that somebody else is able, I can't get upset, and I can't be critical of somebody else who does not have my same reality. They may not be there. They may not have that emotional fortitude. They may not have matriculated in maturity in that measure. And so, is my reality the reality? And then, is your perception the only is your perception the only perspective? Last but not least, is your perspective, or your perception, the only perspective? I always say this: if I'm standing directly in front of something, even though it looks like I see a lot, I really just see one perspective of it. If I'm standing beside something, I now see a different angle and I'm catching something else. If I'm standing behind it, I see something altogether. But if I'm over it, now I have a wide scope. So be mindful about your perspective and that it is limited sometimes as well. So, guys, that is everything that I have today. So excited that you all chose to join me. I really, really hope and pray that today's conversation, today's teaching was helpful to you guys. Again, every Wednesday, as much as I can, let me just say Wednesdays at 1 p.m., you will find me on Facebook Live and YouTube Live teaching on building boardroom brilliance. If you have missed any of my prior segments, go on over and subscribe to my YouTube channel and you will find some amazing resources. Stay connected. In a few days, I will be releasing a major professional development webinar that is going to really be worth the investment for our professional lives. If we are leaders in any capacity in our own business and ministry and our nonprofit and our organization, you're going to want to create a different level of awareness for yourself and for who you are. Maybe you've been a victim of some things, or maybe you are unintentionally victimizing other people that you have authority under. And so I'm going to be releasing a webinar for leaders and for people in authority and in leadership very soon. And I really want to make sure that you guys are aware. So stay connected. Make sure that you keep your notifications on. Make sure that you don't miss out because this is something that I really feel like is needed in this hour to help leaders execute in excellence and expertise. I'm Dr. E, and I'll see y'all next time.